Let's hear more now from Rachel Mackenna, who joins me now live from London. She is a wildlife campaigner at the Environmental Investigation Agency. Welcome to the programme. Tell us, Rachel, what do you hope will come out of what's being called the Elephant Summit being held in Zimbabwe?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. So as you mentioned, Zimbabwe is holding an international summit to rally support to reopen the international ivory trade. And what we'd like to see at the end of this summit is massive pushback from the international community and decision makers and policy makers around the world to this effort. Mm-hmm. International ivory trade has been banned since 1989 under CITES, and appetite for reopening the trade is really at a historic low. Most recent efforts to restart ivory trade by Southern African countries were vetoed in 2019, mm-hmm. and the majority of other African elephant range states have closed their legal markets and urged others to do the same. So we hope at the end of this summit that the international ban will remain very much in place.
Mm-hmm. And help us understand why Zimbabwe and other countries want to restart the ivory trade. We heard earlier in the programme that the communities that look after elephants in Zimbabwe's largest national park, they need the money to actually help look after them. And that's one of the reasons we heard that they wanted to sell the ivory that they had stockpiled there.
It's an interesting question. So we've heard from Zimbabwe and other Southern African countries that they would like to restart the trade to generate revenue. And this is a flawed argument. We believe that there are many challenges facing African economies that are not related to elephant conservation and human-elephant conflict. You know, there are issues such as low employment opportunities, poor agricultural policies, corruption and conflict, etc. But reopening ivory trade is not going to solve these issues, as is being promised by the Zimbabwean and other governments. It's not going to generate enough economic return or social upliftment. And there are many ways that the international community can otherwise help to support sustainable development and sustainable use of wildlife. And one example would be tourism. The tourism sector is an extremely important income generator for many African countries. It can generate more income than ivory sales ever would, mm-hmm. In a long-term and sustainable manner. And it's an interesting stat. Estimates suggest that one single elephant may generate $1.6 million in ecotourism for range countries during their lifetime. So this is much more than opening ivory trade will ever do.
And Rachel, do you think that all the countries gathered there, is around more than a dozen African nations, will actually agree not to restart the ivory trade?
Good question. I mean, what we've seen since 2016 is very much a pushback from most African elephant range states. So those are countries on the continent that have a population of elephants. There's been a pushback to restart ivory trade, and there's been actually efforts to close domestic ivory markets. So the majority of African elephant range states have actually closed their legal markets. They've called on other countries to do the same. And most noteworthy is really China, who was once upon a time the world's largest legal domestic ivory market. They closed their ivory market in 2017 as a direct result of massive spikes in elephant poaching caused by organized criminal networks who are sourcing illegal ivory to launder into the legal market. Because, of course, it's basically impossible for law enforcement to distinguish between legal and illegal ivory. So we don't expect this proposal to go ahead. Mm-hmm. Demand for ivory is at a historic low. Okay. And these countries would have to find a buyer country to actually do trade with. And that buying country would either have to leave CITES to buy the ivory, or they'd have to act in direct contravention of their obligations to international law, which would have serious ramifications in the form of trade sanctions. So it's highly unlikely.
Rachel, you've explained it so well. Thank you very much indeed. Rachel Mackenna from the wildlife campaign at the Environmental Investigation Agency. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.